Okay, everybody, I'm going to talk a little bit about weighted averages. I'm going to do so in 3 steps, basically. I'm first going to show you how to compute one by hand. I think you really get a handle on your grading system if you can do it with a simple calculator. I'm also going to talk about the importance of each assignment, that is to say, the mathematical importance of them. And finally, I'm going to give you a contradiction that can arise if you're using a learning management system like Infinite Campus or PowerSchool or one of those. Okay, to compute a weighted average, we need a couple of things. First of all, we need some assignment types. At my school, they give us the names of those assignment types, and they want every teacher to use the same names. So they've been abstracted a little bit. In fact, abstracted to the point that I can't ever remember what they are. So for my demonstration, I'm going to call my assignment types tests, quizzes, and homework. I think we all know the relative importance of those, so great. We also need to know some weights. Using the weights I'm given, we're going to say that 55% of the grade is from tests, 35% is from quizzes, and 10% is from homework. Okay, so to calculate the overall average, I am going to find the average of each category and then multiply it by the weight of that category and then add them all up. So I've got some data here that I just sort of made up. 2 tests, 5 quizzes, and 10 homework assignments. To calculate the overall average, I'm going to multiply the weight of the test average, 0.55. Remember, 55%, 0.55 are the same thing. 0.55 times the test average, plus 35% of the quiz average, plus 10% times the homework average. We are probably all comfortable with calculating averages, but I'm going to write out the details because I'm going to use them later. To calculate the test average with my data, I'm going to say 0.55 times 90 plus 100 over 2. That's my test average. Then I'm going to say 0.35 times the quiz average, 90 plus 70 plus 90 plus 80, all over 5, because there's 5 of them. I'm not going to write all these out. 0.1 times the homework average. Just know that I'm taking 100 and I'm adding it to itself 8 times. And then I'm adding 2 zeros to represent these homework grades, 2 zeros and 8 100s. There is a total of 10 of those grades. So this is the computation I need to make. Your calculator will do it all for you. 0.55, I'm going to wind up doing 0.55 times 190 over 2 plus 0.35 times, if I add up the quiz grades, I get 420 over 5. And then 0.1 times, if I add up those grades, I get 800 divided by 10. Which is simply 0.55 times 95 plus 0.35 times 84 plus 0.1 times 80. And these numbers right here, 95, 84, and 80, those are the averages of the 3 types of assignment. Okay, again, calculator work. 0.55 times 95 is 52.25. 0.35 times 84 is 29.4. 0.1 times 80 is 8. If I add those numbers up, I will get 89.65. That is the overall average. And as any kid will tell you, an 89.65 gets rounded up to a 90A. So that is the overall weighted average of this kid. So now I want to talk about the parts of this calculation that we just made. A minute ago, we had to find 55% of 95, 35% of 84. We had to deal with percents. I want to give you a little math teacher secret. Maybe you just haven't been told this before. 55% of 95, which is something I just calculated, is exactly the same thing as 95% of 55. Okay, great. Who cares? Well, I think if you recast this percentage in this way, you can then tell the kid that there are 55 total points available for tests for the whole quarter, and based on their performance, they get 95% of the available points. Since there were 55 available points for tests, and I gave 2 tests, I can calculate 55 divided by 2 and get 27.5. So in a way, you can say that this test that I'm giving you, because I'm giving you 2 of them, this test has 27.5 points available in your overall average. If you're building towards an average, this test has 27.5 points available. Notice that that is entirely a function of the weight and the number of tests you give. If you want that number to be smaller, well, you can't change the weight, so you have to give more tests. But as it sits, that's how many points are available. I could do the exact same calculation with quizzes. We had to calculate above 35% of 84. That's what we calculated up here. 35% of 84 is the same thing as 84% of 35. So there are 35 quiz points available throughout the quarter. This kid earned 84% of those 35 points. You remember I gave 5 quizzes, and 35 divided by 5 equals 7. So each quiz that you handed out had 7 overall average points available, and they get however many they get. Each one was 7 points. If you want to sort of say we're building towards a grade, this is a way you can do it. So last thing, I want to show you a tiny contradiction that might show up if you're using a learning management system to calculate your averages. I have made a Google spreadsheet that represents the example we just worked through. These numbers should look vaguely familiar. We've got, the sum of tests, quizzes, and homework. We've got how many of each grade there is. So we can calculate the average for each category type. We have the weighting from the administration, which means I can multiply the average times the weight to get the category points contribution. I have made little notes here that remind you of these calculations in case you've forgotten. But just like we saw a minute ago, the average is a 90. All right, here's the situation that I think might come up. You have one more test to give in the quarter. One more. This kid has an A right now, and you give him a test. Let's say he does pretty well, a 92, an A on the final test. What's his average going to be after taking that test? So I'm going to enter a 92 here and see how the grade changes. All right, when I enter that, keep your eye on the overall average. When I enter the 92, the average drops to a B. Now, how is that possible? So I'm going to explain this, and it's going to use a tiny bit of algebra. I apologize deeply for that, but sometimes it's unavoidable. What do we want to calculate? Instead of calculating the overall average, in this case, we know the overall average that the kid wants. This kid wants an A. So the question I'm going to answer is, what test grade do they need to get the A? All right, what counts as an A? At my school, the lowest grade for an A is a 90. But as we know, rounding matters, so technically the lowest grade for an A is 89.5. I would calculate that the same way I did it above. The only thing is I don't know the test average. So 0.55 times the test average plus 0.35 times the quiz average plus 0.1 times the homework average. But as I said, these are already set, the quizzes and the homework. We're not giving any more quizzes. We're not giving any more homework. We're just giving that last test. So these numbers are the same as they were up above, right? 89.5 is 0.55 times the test average plus 0.35 times the quiz average from above, which was an 84, plus 0.1 times the the homework average, which was an 80. These numbers we have already calculated. So 0.55 times the test average plus 0.35 times 84 was 29.4. 0.1 times 80 was 8. And 29.4 plus 8 is 37.4. So that is the equation I want to solve. 0.55 times the test average plus 37.4. I'm sorry that the algebra machine has to go through this, but it does. Minus 37.4 on both sides, so that goes away. And on this side, I have a 52.1. That's the same as 0.55 times the test average. Right now it's being multiplied by 0.55. So to get test average by itself, I need to divide both sides by 0.55. When I do that, 52.1 divided by 0.55 is 94.72. That is the test average that the kid needs to make an A for the quarter with this last test that we're giving. That's the average that he needs to achieve. Well, how would I have calculated the test average? Well, it would have been 90 plus 100 plus whatever that last test is. That should be 94.72. But in this case, I divide by 3 because there are 3 tests. This represents the test average. And now I can solve this for x, right? Sorry, more algebra. Multiply by 3 on both sides. 3 times 94.72 is 284.18. And that's equal to, I'm going to combine these two together, 90 plus 100 is 190 plus x. So to get x by itself, I'm going to subtract 190 from both sides, and I'm going to get 94.18 for x. That is the grade that this kid needs on his final test to keep an A for the quarter. So what happened? Well, he didn't make a 94.18 or higher. He made a 92. It really comes down to the fact that by adding one more test, we're decreasing the importance of the other 2 tests. So the 90 and especially that 100, we're doing a lot of work for this kid. By adding one more test, those 2 tests aren't as important. And given that his grades, in the other categories aren't wonderful, the test average just needed to be a little higher in order to maintain the A. So the contradiction that we saw is that adding another test decreases the importance of the existing tests. So the grade can actually drop if he doesn't make the grade that he needs to make. I could do this same calculation for a B. I'm not going to, but I could. This 89.5 would change to a 79.5 to make the B. You could go through all of these calculations and you would find out that he needs a 39.6 to make a B. So his chances of making a B are really high. Anything from 39.6 to 94.18 is going to give him a B. 94.18 or higher is going to give him an A. If you go back to the Google Sheet, I'm going to clear out this 92, and I'm going to show you a column that I had initially hidden, where I actually go through these calculations for you. I'm calling this the last test in quotation marks. He needed a 94.2 to get an A, needed a 39.6 to get a B, and you can experiment with these grades if you want and see what kind of grades are necessary. I am going to show this calculation to students at my school. I think they're going to be interested in knowing what they need to make on a last test. The real emphasis I want to make is that the grade that Infinite Campus shows you is an estimate. It's a best guess based on the information it has. Let's think about maybe earlier in the semester when you really have very few grades. Let's say you only have quiz grades and homework grades. You haven't given a test yet. How is Infinite Campus going to calculate a final grade with nothing for 55% of its average? Well, it knows that I've got 0.35 to give to quizzes, and I've got 0.1 to give to homework, and it has nothing to substitute for tests. So what it does, 35% plus 10% is 45%. So it actually divides both of these by 45. If you do that on a calculator, 0.35 divided by 0.45, 777. All right, so this gives me 0.778 or so. That is to say 77.78%. For homework, I would get 0.222. That is to say 22.22%. When it doesn't have full information, it uses what it has to calculate a grade. In this case, it uses 77.7% of the grade is from quizzes and 22% is from homework. Now, we know quizzes don't count 77.7%, and we know homework isn't 22.2%. But Infinite Campus is in the real world, and it has to report a grade. If it left missing its grade until everything was calculated, there would be surprises that we don't want. All right, that is all I have to say about weighted averages. I hope this was helpful. If you have more questions, you know where to find me. The final grade that it gives